Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Productivity Mastery. Another week, another set of iconic guests. The gentlemen I have in here today with me, it wouldn't be an understatement to say these guys are world's leading authorities in the areas of high performance and productivity. The gentleman behind the GTD methodology, arguably the most popular productivity methodology in the world that transformed the way millions of people navigate a complex life and grow their businesses. I'm one of these millions of people. This system, this methodology had a profound impact on my life, my career, and I'm very, very happy to welcome here David Allen, the creator of GTD, and Edward Lamont, a team performance authority and founder of some of the largest GTD organizations in Europe. They have a new book, Team Getting Things Done with Others. Now the personal productivity is brought into a team context. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you today?
Just fine. Thanks for the invitation. Yay.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you, Stoyan.
Great to have you guys. So let's maybe start with the story. How did you guys meet? Edward, what was your first touch point with the GTD methodology?
Well, it's interesting because it was wonderful to listen to you describe this and include me alongside David. That's very, very kind of you. But I'm one of the people whose lives was transformed by the methodology. I think I was working already as a trainer and a coach and a consultant back in the early 2000s. Had a successful business, flying around the world, working for big names, consultancies and large corporates worldwide. But I couldn't really experience the success I was having because I was just so stressed. And someone gave me this book, Getting Things Done, and I then didn't read it, of course, because I didn't have time to. So I put it on my bedside and looked at it for 6 months. And then I was going to New York and I just grabbed it in the hopes that it could help me. And on the plane, I skimmed it in about 20 minutes and I got 3 ideas that were game changing. If true, that was where I finished. I just went like, if that's true, then I can have a completely different relationship with my work. Then I read the book, I read it again, I underlined it, I highlighted it, I gave it to my assistant, and then implemented mostly backwards, but still got huge value, even though I had not done it anywhere near correctly. So then I went and I finally looked up David in Boston, and that's where we initially met. In one of David's seminars. I think there was about 100 people in the room, and midway through day 2 of the seminar, I walked up and just said, I don't know if you have any idea how much energy you're releasing in this room right now. David, of course, would have been familiar with that and would have heard it in some form before, but I really needed to say, hey, this is really, really cool what you're doing here. And then from there, we've just we stayed in touch. We tried to get something going in 2005. It didn't work. We tried to get something going in 2008. It did work. So since 2009, I've been working with and for David with GTD.
David, what was your first impression of Edward?
Sweet guy. And, he had nice things to say. So what can I say? But yay, happy to meet you. So, we've been simpatico ever since. Again, trying to figure out the business relationships was another, just a project to try to figure that out. I was still struggling at that time to try to figure out how to scale what I was doing in some international way, and fumbled around with mistakes and, trying to do it this way or that. So it wasn't until, as Ed said, 2008, I don't remember exactly when that was, when, I partnered with some folks that seemed to know what they were doing in terms of building an international license franchise model. and they had done that successfully with their business. And so they showed up and said, "Hey, David, how about we do this for you?" So we said, "Okay, sure." So that's kind of where I was with all of this, and delighted, obviously, that the success that Ed and his partners had with building, successful business of training, coaching, teaching, keynoting, whatever, about the GTD model. They're smart guys, and we're really good at it. So, yay.
I mean, we connected initially. I think we were both still wearing suits at that point, and so there was a little bit of some sense that like David is this like super organized guy who's been in the business world forever, and I showed up like a thrusting young business guy, and then we got to talking over drinks in London when David came to London, and we realized.
It's a nice picture of him, though. Oh, he's back. He's back. So we heard you up until drinks in London.
Okay. You guys kind of disappeared on me too. Drinks in London, and we just kind of realized that we weren't really in the kind of the business world. Typically, we both had very, very eclectic careers, and we had come into the business world and were able to add value because of a very, very different way of seeing the world because of our previous experience.
Well, I had figured out my methodology. I was not a business person at that time. I was a American intellectual history major in graduate school in my sort of academic life, back then. Dropped out of graduate school to go find myself and God and truth in the universe, and had to just make a living doing other things. So I was never really part of the big corporate world, but I wound up, as I started my own little consulting practice, finding things that helped me stay clear and focused. And some big guy in the corporate world saw what I was doing. He said, "Dave, do we need that in our whole company? So could you design some sort of a training around what you've come up with? And let's try it out." So I did, and it was highly successful. So I found myself thrust into the corporate training world. This is 1983. In 1984, we did a pilot program for 1,000 executives and managers at Lockheed in California. And it was probably their most successful training that they offered. So suddenly I was thrust into, and it turns out that, short, bottom line, it was that world that was most interested in what I'd come up with, and they were willing to pay for it. Wow. Because in the certainly mid to late 80s and then the 90s for sure, a lot of the larger organizations were getting swamped with the tsunami of email and corporate change and flattened organizations and et cetera, et cetera. And so what I had come up with just turned out to be a wonderful both Band-Aid and cure for a lot of the stress that was showing up out there in the business world. So, I sort of created my own business around that, but I'm not really an entrepreneur or particularly aspirational about building big businesses and then repeating that. I was more a researcher of what I'd come up with and then an educator, about that, and then delighted to have found some sort of a business model that I could keep doing it. So, Ed came into that game as well, major player.
It's really interesting what you're sharing. We have a lot of entrepreneurs listening and ambitious business leaders, and I'm very happy and grateful that you guys are so open and sharing. Like everybody's looking at GTD and such methodologies, and because of the success, because of the scale and the impact you've created, some people might be thinking, it's probably been easy for David, and it's just things probably took off because it's a great methodology. So he just published the book and everything exploded. But you're talking about literally decades before you get to a place that like you scale to this level you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Took a
I
while.
mean, as someone who came, late to the party in the early 2000s and then started a business based around this, that was one of the areas where my life was transformed. There's no way I could have built two businesses in 5 countries without using this methodology. Just no way. I was a bright kid with a lot of energy, and I was completely missing the structure for getting things done. So when I found it, it was just a huge enabler for actually getting things done, and indeed for writing this book. Right, without the methodology, this book would never ever have existed. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I had been in the training business for at least 10 years at the time that I found GTD. And I thought, this is so cool. This is so amazing. This is, changing lives. And I'm going to get the license. And then people are going to run in my door and try and tear it off of me because it's so good. And then I discovered there was this thing called sales. You have to sell the thing, and you can't solve a problem for people who don't think they have that problem. So they have to think they have the problem before you can offer a solution. And so it was a bit of a wake up when we started the business and realized not everybody understands just how much better their productivity can be until they do, and that's where sales comes in.
Yeah, it's been an issue for me for 40 years. How do I sell this when people don't think they need it? Or they're not aware how much they need it? And I understand that because, what has paraded itself is time management and organization systems and so forth, basically never really solved anybody's problem the way they were designed. And so a lot of people have just a lot of kind of negative context for how they think about, wow, something else I need to do that's not going to work. So that's our biggest problem. My job, I've never been a marketer or into sales. My sales was called pick up the phone. See who's interested, and it was all referral based. So only in the last few years, if we thought about even hiring or using somebody who could help us sort of how do we frame this in a more marketing way. I was just sort of responding to work as it showed up. And, that was successful enough because it always worked. A lot of my business showed up for people who were married to people who were in my seminar in their company. And then she worked at some other company and she said, God, we need that. Can we bring that in? That's how I got into Deutsche Bank. That's how I got, because I was doing work at Goldman Sachs. And one of them was married to somebody who was a key training person in Deutsche Bank. So, that's that's kind of, and Ed, I see from your response, you probably had a lot of the same experience.
Yeah.
You have to engage with this model before you really get the value of it. And so, how do you get people to engage with this if they either don't think they need it, don't have time to read the book, like Ed, because they're so busy, and everybody's already up to here anyway. They got, do I need anything more that I need to try to do? Because I'm trying to do everything I can anyway. And so, so it's been an eternal sort of marketing promotional issue, for all of us in this world.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I've always kind of described as knowing about GTD is the booby prize, right? Like it's the booby prize is a bad prize. It's a prize you don't want. And if knowing about GTD, basically, if you read it and you understand it, but then don't implement it, all you really have is another stick to beat yourself with. Like it's another thing I'm not doing. Like I'm not losing weight. I'm not practicing GTD. I'm not going to the gym, and you don't need that. And as David says, like the real power of this is just, it doesn't make any difference what part of it you do. It will help you. You don't have to do it all, but you have to do something in order to get some value.
I'm going to push back a tiny little bit in that. From an example, I had a guy, I did a seminar years and years ago. This is in LA somewhere. And he came up to me after the seminar. He said, David, I'm so excited. This is so cool. I said, well, tell me about it. What was your experience? He said, well, it's like you let me know that heaven exists. He said, I don't think I'm going to do what I need to do to get into heaven, but I'm just really glad to know it's there. So at some point, I had to make peace with myself that all I'm selling is hope. And that people know if things get bad enough, there is a way out. And so to some degree, that's some degree that I just had to get comfortable with, because I'd have burned out a long time ago if I expected people to go implement this. It's like, well, and to Ed's point, this is not running with scissors. Any part of this, if you just write a few more things out of that are in your head, that get them out of your head somewhere, you're going to improve your life. If you make a next action decision about something that you have your attention on sooner than you might normally do that, you're going to improve your life. If you just step back, God, and once a week, just kind of looked at what you're doing and all the stuff and all your list, all your project, if you just step back and reflect a little bit about all the things that you're engaged in, you're going to improve your life. So again, to Ed's point, and the truth is, all of this works. Any of this works. Very few people really do the whole game. If they do, it is transformational, really. So, long story short.
Love it. Love it. And combined, you probably have, I don't know how many decades of working with organizations, with teams. And I wonder, have you been primarily, initially at least, focused on personal productivity, working with executives, with managers, with different companies, or has it been always a combination of individual personal productivity and high performance for teams? How has that evolved?
Mine was just personal productivity for the most part. I stayed busy that way. I didn't really have the bandwidth to do anything else other than my own consulting practice, which I was often brought in once people sort of knew me and they trusted me. They say, can you come in and help our team walk through something and do something? And so I did a whole lot of that, especially in my earlier days. Ed has a lot more experience in what you're talking about than I do. So
yeah,
Ed,
I sort of started, I think, because I've always been a relentless optimizer of myself, or at least that's been a desire, is to work out how does this thing work that I'm doing here, and how can I get better at it. So there was always that as a kind of a thrust through the middle of it. But quite early on in my coaching and training, I was, called in to start working with teams on, mission, vision, strategy type stuff, and did a lot of that work. And then, took a bit of a hiatus from that to do the GTD thing, but then it sort of led back into doing more work with teams, which is how we kind of came to this discussion back in 2020, just a few weeks before the pandemic. Okay, I think there might be a gap here. What do you think? And so we discussed it over lunch, and we kind of got to, actually there is something that we can be doing here that's not if you think about this individual level as being at the bottom, and then you've got above that, you've got the teams level where you can make interventions. In the conversation, we got clear that you can't make a team better just by making all the individuals better. You can do a lot if you just train more individuals, but there are things happening at the team level that if you don't address them, then the individuals, no matter how good they get, simply won't be able to collaborate in a way that will make their work easier and allow them to get to the important things that they're supposed to be doing as a team. So that was kind of the genesis conversation that that sounds a little bit theoretical. There was also a component, frankly, of frustration, because we've, as you said, I guess we've got 6 or 7 decades between us of working with organizations and, just training really smart people who are very motivated up to go back into a chaotic situation. At a certain stage, that's frustrating, right? You want them to go back and flourish. And if they're going back and what they can do is play self-defense, that's not quite as satisfying.
Yeah. And, the gap I'd known for 40 years, I would teach people this and they go, God, I wish everybody around me got this, especially my life partner and my kids. Life would be so much easier and better. And I never had the bandwidth or the time, frankly, or an opportunity to think, well, how could I help do that other than train more of them individually so that they could sort of catch this? I mean, to Ed's point, yeah, a team will work a lot better if everybody on the team gets GTD, handles their agreements, manages things, focus on outcomes and actions, as a habitual practice. But then Ed really brought to the table, wait a minute, we've seen high performance individuals on teams with sort of osmotically, it has influenced the culture significantly. So how can we not just let that happen ad hoc? What are the things that we could do, that we could provide a manual or some sort of a template about how teams could do this in a much more conscious way so they could produce those kinds of positive results? So, but Ed really brought that to the table because of his experience with these senior teams that he and his company have been working with.
We had a podcast episode with another guest, and it was called "A Team of High Performers versus a High Performing Team." And it was a very interesting discussion around it. I just want to shout out to everybody who's joining us live. We have Yeva from Latvia, Gergana is joining us from Bulgaria, Nicolette from Romania, Navid is joining us from Austria. Quite a few people listening. Thanks for being with us, guys. Healthy high performance. I love this phrase, and I would like if you guys can elaborate. Why do we have to not just build high performing teams, but create this culture of healthy high performance?
Well, I think if you just look around you in the world, right, you can see we've focused on high performance for, let's just call it 70 years, 80 years, where there's been a real dynamic of focusing on performance and not really costing in the externalities, as they're known, of high performance, right? So if you're not costing in the costs to your environment, your relationships, your health, your physical health, your mental health, while you're achieving high performance on some financial metric, then frankly, your financial metric is not helping at that point. So it's not that we have anything against people earning money or high performance on a financial thing, but as we were working on this, we thought about the idea of mind like water and what that would be on a team, and that's how we got to this idea of healthy high performance, where it would be a lot easier if we were able to measure some of these things, but you can't really measure things like the social health of someone, or the spiritual health, or their mental health. That's very difficult to measure, but that doesn't mean that it's not important, right?
What has been measured are recent polls. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, Gallup and other people, the number of people who feel engaged with their work, 20% in Europe, maybe 30% in the US. But that means 70 or 80% of people are disconnected. They go to work to make a paycheck, but then come home to relieve the stress from that work. And that's not highly sustainable. So I think Ed and I both said, look, you need high performance. That's kind of a given that you need that, but you also need the health. And health is not just the health physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. of the people on the team, so they don't burn out and don't leave just because of the stress. But by the way, back to the point, that has been measured. How many billions of euros are being spent for people who have taken off of work that they're still being paid for, but they're off of work because they're burned out, they're stressed out, and whatever. And there have been numbers that have shown up about how expensive that is.
It's
So
billions. It's billions.
Yeah.
For sure. I guess my point is simply that those billions are not being costed into what's traditionally being called high performance, right? So we're not holding those things together when we're making decisions about what high performance is. And this book, we hope, and David identified fairly early on that there's a bit of a manifesto in here. Like there's a real thrust for let's see if we can do something a little bit differently, a little bit better than has been happening until now. And if we address this at the level of the team, we actually will be enabling the individuals, we'll be giving authority, permission for them to think about how they're performing in a healthy way, as opposed to just how they're performing. Right, give them a much more sustainable approach to doing what they do.
I just had a conversation. By the way, Ed, I'll connect you with this guy, Don Jones, fellow Canadian, by the way.
Cool.
And his company Experience It developed simulations, and they've trained thousands and thousands of people in simulation trainings. And his new thought and a new book that he's writing basically makes the point that organizations, as you grow an organization, you decrease personal productivity. You grow a city, you increase productivity. He said, what's the difference? The difference is that in a city, you're free to go where you want to go, play who you want to play with, do what you feel like you want to do, have a lot of opportunities, a lot of resources available to you. He said, that's the opposite of what most organizations have. And so as you grow an organization, you actually start to stifle the stuff that actually increases productivity. You start to clamp down on it. You've got hierarchy. You've got, they should do this. We have to do this. Then we have these rules and these regulations. You don't have the freedom to hang out, and have fun or just go explore what you want to be doing. So, Ed and I think we identified anyway, just a trend. It's a small trend, but it's a growing trend in terms of self-organizing organizations that then give a lot more freedom to people to organize themselves and to manage themselves in this process. I mean, that's been going on for a while in terms of flattened organizations. We need to get rid of 14 levels of management, have people be more accountable to do their own work, et cetera. So that's been a trend that's been going on for quite a while, but now that's speeding up tremendously, especially with, post-pandemic, where people had to then start to work individually and then had to figure out how they were going to manage themselves in that process. But it's an interesting series of dynamics that are going on in terms of the change in the workplace, the change in whatever. But I thought that was fascinating, because cities, as they grow, have more productive individuals.
Interesting.
Organizations, as they grow, clamp down on it, decrease individual productivity. So I thought, fascinating dynamic. Yeah. I think we identified that. And a lot of what we're talking about is, look, if the team can make itself work functionally, not trying to transform everybody or have some major thing happen, but handle the mechanics. That if the mechanics are screwed up, they don't have the freedom to focus on what they should be focused on. People love to work on a team. They love to have a team that produces results. That's very satisfying to people to be able to do that. So we just try to identify all the stuff that gets in the way of that, all the things that create friction and constraints that could be relieved pretty simply.
And what I love about the book, once again, everybody who's listening, you need to get a copy of the book. The book is called Team: Getting Things Done with Others. It's probably the most comprehensive team performance book ever, including it's like operational system. Literally, you got to read the book. You find something for you. You find a lot of stuff for you. You don't have to apply it all, but I'm telling you, you find ideas you can implement in your team right now. And I love the topic we're getting into, and I'm more and more excited to go deeper. But it's the how do we find this kind of sweet spot? Because that's what we need, right? We need these goals and vision and purpose and this structure, operational system, how we act. But then we also want to give more authority and freedom to be able to act within these constraints. And maybe just to make it more practical, I wonder if we get into a hypothetical situation where a new client gets you guys to work with them to consult them how to improve on that both fronts. Where do you start? Like, how do you assess, and what's the first thing you're going to recommend this client, this leader to do?
Well, I think you need to start where they need to start. You kind of identified it in what you were saying, right? So you don't have to do everything. You need to do what you need to do. So, I mean, the first intervention would certainly be to, ask some questions, where, because if they don't have a problem, we can't solve it. So we need to identify where they think they have a problem. And effectively you would start there and then expand, in order to move to where they currently have problems that they don't know about. But if you've built some credibility by, for instance, establishing, your team is not super motivated. Like we've talked to them, they're not super motivated. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. You might want to start with purpose. If, on the other hand, you talk to the team and you discover, they're just super frustrated because they're taking hours and hours of every day just to communicate with each other because they're over communicating and they're over communicating in multiple channels, then you might want to start with just this idea of what we called working standards, right? To have the team make some agreements with itself about how it wants to work. Not in a very abstract way, like, hey, we want to respect each other. Of course you do. But to actually make that granular and work out, well, what does working respectfully, what does that mean? If I saw it on Tuesday afternoon, how would I know? And, that might mean they decide they're going to respond within X hours to communications. It might mean that they're going to make it easy for the person they're communicating with to understand the nature of the communication they have in front of them. So not sending them 10-page attachments, but summarizing that thing, making sure that the subject, it's simple stuff, but it's simple stuff that's not often used. And it's simple stuff that can really change how a team feels about working together.
Another approach would be if I walked in and knew nothing about any of that, this is pretty much just basic GTD, getting things done stuff. What has your attention? What has their attention may not be something they're perceiving currently as a problem, but something that an opportunity or a challenge or some change that happened that they haven't yet appropriately engaged with. So that's where I would start, is walk in and go, hey, come on, let's get your attention, because whatever has a team's attention means it's not on cruise control yet. That means there's some decision that hasn't been made yet, or some result of that decision making that haven't been parked in trusted people or places that people will see in the right time and context, which is how you get your head clear. That's how you get a team clear. Well, what's in the way of clarity? So, me and my company, and basically, our purpose is creating a world where there are no problems, there are only projects.
Sorry, you froze there. You looked like you had a stroke, but
I'm alive. I'm alive. He's alive. He's alive.
Yes,
I'm back.
I think we lost you at the only projects, and then
that's right. So anything that's got people's attention may be something that they call a problem, but many times the problems, they usually try to find some solution to a problem. What they don't have solutions for is what has the team's attention, because oftentimes you'll hear what has the team's attention in what I refer to as your analysis. You know, two guys taking a piss and they're going, oh God, one way, but they were done, and there's all that subterranean, chatter and anxiety or anxiousness or lack of clarity. So, a lot of what we're talking about is how do you build transparency on a team so that the team can then focus appropriately as a team and work together. You don't have to like people that you work with, but you better have agreements about how you're working together. Right? So you may not go to dinner with everybody on your team, but you better make sure that you feel comfortable showing up in a team context with whoever's playing with you, and not going subterranean or subliminal about the issues that you feel like you have about it. That may be more on a personal level than we're not trying to address that. We're trying to address the mechanics that then make those kinds of things happen with people interpersonally if they're not handled well. If they're handled well, then it kind of moves to a whole different level. And you might find out that you actually like people you thought you didn't like before, as long as you start to agree on how you're going to play as a team. Strange how that works.
We have a couple of questions. Gergana is asking us, how can we maintain the well-being of the team while ensuring the company remains productive and effective?
I mean, that's an interesting question, right? So the assumption is that you can have either health or you can have high performance. And one of the things that we're positing in the book is that you can have both. It's not easy to have both, but you're going to have much more creative and better responses if you're considering both as you try to move forwards, right? So again, what has been called high performance in the past is not fully costed. And so if you start to think about it, what is actually going to give me a group of individuals who are excited to come to work, who are fascinated about the possibilities of developing new accounts and developing new products, as opposed to just dragging themselves in because they're a worn out husk of a human being. So we're saying just high performance, that's actually kind of easy. Just health, also easy. Healthy high performance, that's a real challenge, but it's certainly worth going after given the alternatives.
And if you only focused on well-being in the health in that way, then you have the kumbaya culture or ayahuasca rituals, and you don't produce much of anything, just because you're being loving people together. And wow, let's hold hands and let's sing together and yay. So you don't want just that, So to Ed's point, how do you balance that? And that's not an easy equation to figure out. I think it's an equation that's important. So whether you figure it out or not, at some point, you're going to have to come to some level of conclusion about does that work or not. And health is not just about the people on the team. It's also about the team itself. How repeatable is the team's high performance? If suddenly everybody left on the team and you had to create a new team, do you know how to do that? See, there are a lot of high performing teams. They just, I think, may not be that conscious of how they got there, or how they would repeat it if they needed to, or how to make it sustainable. I mean, these days, turnover in terms of people on teams is huge and increasing, right? You suddenly have 3 new people on your team. You just have 3 people who left, right? How do you make sure you bring them on, that they know what the standards are in terms of your rules of engagement and how you're going to work together? Can you maintain that high performance, no matter what changes happen in terms of people and in terms of situations out there? So that's also health of the team. Does the team have healthy structures, healthy procedures and processes. If it doesn't, it's going to be ad hoc. Good luck. And, there's a graveyard of companies that basically their success was their downfall because they couldn't repeat it, or they couldn't keep it current, or they couldn't keep it going. Polaroid would be one of the best examples. GE, come on. There are a lot of companies that are just crashed and burned because they were sort of built on the charisma of either the leadership or the vision to begin with, but nobody kept it current in terms of the changes in the world, the changes in God knows all the different things that create the changes out there. So
we had a really interesting guest on the podcast. He's the founder of a company called Typeform, and they were two designers who just built a great product because they loved it for a client, and then they decided, well, it seems like there's market for that. They started scaling, but they're designers. They didn't know how to lead and manage people. So his name is David, by the way, also, and he said, now we have 500 people. We didn't know how to build culture. We created this happy, he said, kumbaya kind of culture, but it became, he said, kind of a entitlement culture. Everybody, it was not about we, it was about me. I need this. I need, because they've spent so much onto the side of let's take care of people and not enough on accountability, results, structure. So it became the opposite. And he said, now I have 500 people. After a few years, we realized that we're designers and we don't want to manage people. We hired the CEO to run the stuff, but it's still, after several years, we cannot kind of get back to this high performing culture. We have the other element maybe, but it's tough. How do you find the sweet spot, right?
It's got to be conversations, and it's one of the reasons we decided to stay at the level of the team rather than try and scale this up for entire organizations or societies, right? It's just, as a team, you can actually fairly quickly have conversations that can be quite transformative in terms of their impact on the team. But you would need to be having the conversation with, okay, well, this is where we're going. This is where we decided we're going. What do we need in order to get there? And that includes, what structures do we need, as David has said? What do you guys need in order to be able to show up here and give your best? Because it's fairly clear in the economy that we've created, you're not getting paid by the hour, right? You're getting paid by the ability of your ideas to really move the needle on something. So you need to be in a state to be able to have great ideas. You don't, as David has said many times, you don't need time to have great ideas. You just need space in your brain. But it's difficult to have space in your brain when your hair is on fire because you've got so many commitments that you're not currently getting to, that you're just in a shame spiral all the time, right? So those are all conversations I think a team needs to have. How do we get ourselves into the state where we can perform as a team?
couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Great. We have another question, which I think is interesting. How do you find the sweet spot between spending the right amount of time in exploration research and then start implementing? Some team members fancy sitting in exploration long, and others are rushing to implementation immediately as a personal preference.
Great to have both. You need both. You need visionaries and you need implementers. You just need to make sure that your process is set up. So it's vision time. Let's do vision, brainstorm, blue sky, whatever. And then once you come up with whatever conclusions you come up with, then how do we operationalize this? And how do we make that work? So you really need both. And so you have to, that's another balance you have to strike, in terms of those. So personality wise, some people love the vision, blue sky. Oh, we can be creative. We can do all this. And then a lot of people say, no, just tell me what to do. Let me manage the details. Let me get a spreadsheet and let me do all that. And you couldn't get by with one or the other without both. You need that. if you want to make good stuff happen, right? You got to figure out what the good stuff is, and then you have to figure out how to make it happen. So, sorry, that's been probably a universal issue for 100,000 years.
But and I think the response from the book that we've written, and David found this thing called the natural planning model 30 odd years ago, I think it was, and he says, so we've explored that precisely from this perspective. To a certain extent, you need to think about, well, what is the nature of the thing we're working on, right? So if the thing that I'm working on is a bridge or a nuclear power station, then you need to spend a fair amount of time doing planning, so you don't end up with the thing that happened. I think it was up in Finland, where they got halfway through building the nuclear power plant and then realized they hadn't planned in the weight of the steel they needed in the power plant, and they had to stop and take it all apart and put it back together again. Very expensive error. So in things like that, you need to spend a lot of time in planning. But certainly my experience, in the business that I run, or that I run with my partners, is that most of our work isn't like that, right? It's a kind of a thing where you need to get moving, and once you're moving, you've got those serendipitous things that can happen, those really lucky coincidences that can happen only once you're in motion. And this natural planning model is beautiful for that, because you can spend 10 minutes planning and come up with a decent next action which moves you forward. You can spend an hour planning and come up with a bunch of next actions that move you forward. You can spend a day planning, and so you can use it iteratively to move forwards. That, I think, is the sweet spot. It's the process that you're using rather than it's some place that you're getting to.
And by the way, there is a TEDx, if I remember, that David is talking about the natural planning model, right? It was a TEDx talk you can find online. If I remember, it was a bear. I remember a bear, but so let's go back to 2020. Like, the world of work has been changing constantly since the beginning of time, but 2020 was a special year with the pandemic. Many companies being forced to start working in a work from home, remote, hybrid kind of different models. And now in 2024, seems like many organizations are still struggling. How do I navigate? How do I manage a team that's, at home at some days? And how do we build the structure? What do we do? And many organizations seem to be struggling to figure out, how do I build a culture of accountability? Because many of my people, they're not in the office anymore, right? They need to be accountable, and they need to be self-organized, working from home. We're in a team, but everybody's kind of spread in different locations, working from home. So maybe some thoughts on accountability, building a culture of accountability.
Well, I'll speak to that, because I've had decades now where our organization was always role-based, not title-based. And defining what your role is probably one of the biggest gaps out there in terms of teams working effectively. Is like, is this yours or mine? Who's doing this? And what is this that we need to do? And what's the purpose of doing that? If your role is clear, it doesn't matter where you are. And the accountabilities of that role are clear. Look, in this role, your role is to ensure that we have optimal customer service in X, Y, and Z. Or your role is to ensure that, our events are all handled logistically well, and no gaps in all of that. So when those roles are clear, who cares where they are? Who cares when they work, right? So there's a lot more freedom for people once roles are clear and accountabilities are clear and purpose of that role is clear. So I've had a lot of experience with that, just with our own team and our own company, and how we've done that over the years. And that's a huge improvement opportunity, probably for any team Just why are you a team? Well, first of all, the team has a purpose. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a team. Why are you a team? Because you're supposed to be doing what? What's the accountability of the team? And by the way, who owns that? As soon as two people have it, nobody does, right? So is this yours? Is this mine? Who's going to manage how often we need to see what's going on in the team? Who's going to manage how all that? That's a role. That's a role and accountability to that role. You could change that. Call, hey, I don't want to do that role now. That's now yours. Fine, as long as you have the freedom to define the work by the roles that need to be fulfilled, their accountabilities, and their purpose as a role. Then you have a lot more freedom to have a lot more of the kind of global, virtual, hybrid, workspaces that we have. But most of those complaints are out there because those roles are not clear.
And I would pick it up and go in a slightly different direction, but certainly complementary to what David just said, is that I think that the whole location of where work is getting done thing is, in terms of accountability, is a red herring, right? So I've never worried about where my people are. I'm only really interested in, are they doing the work that I've asked them to do? So the shift that people could make is to stop worrying about where their people are and start worrying about leading with outcomes. So asking for an outcome and then waiting for the outcome to come back. And then if you get what you want, great, say thank you. If you don't, then you've got a coaching opportunity, right? So that's one thing. I think in terms of accountability, the location thing is not really the relevant point. The relevant point is trust. Do I trust that my people are going to be doing their best and giving me their best independent of where they are? If yes, fabulous. If no, well, what do we need to do to build that trust? And that's where I think the location thing is relevant, because if you simply think that the zeros and ones of human communication since, before we were humans, frankly, we've been in the same space with each other. We've watched each other. We've smelled each other. There's a whole host of information that's transmitted when we are together. That's very, very important for us to be able to build trust with each other. And not ever seeing the people that you work with changes that dynamic. Now, it's not necessarily wrong, but you do need to compensate for the fact that you now no longer have people who are linked together in the way that we have been forever. And I think one of the places where I'm concerned for the whole hybrid working dynamic is in terms of culture of organizations and teams, because it's really difficult to transmit culture without having each other and being able to look at each other and feel each other in the way that we have forever. So people can change organizations without really, changing their desk, changing anything. That's different than it has been forever.
And I have a feeling if everybody listening to this can only take this one kind of principle and say, let us build a outcome-driven organization, and just emphasize to everybody from C-level to management to employees that whatever they do, it needs to be outcome-driven. I have a feeling that 80% of the problems will just get resolved by themselves.
It could be. And then again, Google, and one of the famous things about the Google culture was that everybody had 20% of their time they could allocate to who knows what. Play, experiment, explore. So they weren't outcome driven, they were more exploration driven. What could we be thinking about now? So yeah, I agree that outcome and action are the zeros and ones of productivity. What are we trying to do, and how do we allocate or reallocate resources to make it happen? Come on, that's the essence, of how you make anything happen. But a lot of times the outcome is a serendipitous thing that only shows up when you give yourself permission and freedom to play. And so, there's a whole lot of value to being able to build structures that give people permission to play. Not only that, and this is back to the just personal productivity, that people themselves give themselves permission to play because they're in control of their life. They're not overwhelmed or distressed or have an overwhelming ambient anxiety that wakes them up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So if people then manage themselves appropriately, they have more freedom to do that, and then building structures so that those whatever they may show up with as a great idea has room to be expressed and tried out or explored or whatever. Anyway, there's another version of just the freedom of people being able to, play the way they want to play, but only when they have permission to do that, and they also are not distracted by the other stuff they're being held accountable to do. Anyway, that was more than maybe what you ask about, but something that's fresh on my mind about that.
To me, it's this outcome-driven approach is like you said, the Google example, right? It's the intention, the outcome is let's be, I don't know, creative, spontaneous. So it's still outcome-driven in a way, right? Like this
Sure.
like intentional. So another question, and this is an interesting first question: is productivity for everyone? Is there a chance to be healthy, high-performing team if there is someone on team who operates on their own manner / system?
I mean, it's an interesting question. Productivity is for everyone inside of their own definition, right? So I think the mistake that I think everybody makes who comes into contact with GTD is that, hey, this is going to help me get everything done, and I'm going to get it done in a particular way, and I'm going to tick lots of boxes. Where and frankly, most people, I would say, abuse it insofar as they have a certain level of stress. They discover GTDD. They get way more done, but they maintain their level of stress, right? And that's kind of not what it's for, or what's possible with it. One thing is to do less and have less stress. One thing is to do the same amount and have less stress. So there's all kinds of possibilities in that. I think what we're not saying is that everybody on the team has to be productive in the same way. No way. What we're saying is that the team wants to agree how it wants to work with itself. And to come back to the idea of the outcome, I don't care how you get me the thing that you told me you were going to deliver. You don't have to do it my way. But if we've had a conversation and we've had some negotiation that you're going to do this, then go ahead and get it to me. You can do it at the last minute. You can do it way ahead of time. You can do it being relaxed in 5-minute bursts, or you can do it all in the hour before it's due. But that's necessary for a team. Otherwise, you can't really collaborate.
Understand, though, guys, productivity has a lot of baggage around a word. Everybody thinks that's work harder, do more, or whatever. Productivity simply means produce what you want. If you go to a party to have fun and you don't have fun, that's not a productive party, right? Productivity is simply, what are you trying to do? If you're trying to relax and you don't relax, you go to a vacation to relax and you don't relax, that's an unproductive vacation. So it's productivity for everyone. You couldn't stop if you tried. You're being productive. Go get out of the room. How do I get out of the room? Okay, I go get out of the room. I got to get dressed. Oh yeah, that's productivity. It means you're just producing whatever result that you want. So can we just, I just love it if we could just erase all the baggage around the word of productivity. Usually what people mean is productivity, meaning how can I get, to Ed's point, how can I get more done with less effort, or with the same effort get more done? Yeah, that's an increase in your productivity. That's not the definition of productivity. So, is productivity for everyone? Yes. And can you have a healthy, high-performance team if there's someone on the team who operates in their own manner system? To Ed's point, hey, depends on what the team wants to do, what their role is, and are they fulfilling that role? If they're not, get rid of them. Or train them. Depends on your patience.
There was an interesting statistics I came across the other day. It was 98% of managers in German organizations believe that they're great managers. 60% of employees say that they have a bad manager. And then there's this 60% of managers actually admit that they never had a management or leadership training. So it's a very interesting something to think about. But since we're at the end of this conversation, I want to respect your time, gentlemen. Thank you so much, David, Edward, being here with us, sharing your wisdom. Everybody needs to get a copy of this book. Here it is. Once again, this is my audio version. You can find it on Kindle, on paper, audio, whatever you prefer. Team Getting Things Done with Others. It's a comprehensive guide on how to build a healthy, high performance. Just as a final kind of a message from you, who is this book for, and why should people get a copy of the book?
Well, I'd say as we dedicated the book to good people doing good work with other people, or wanting to get good work done with other people. So whoever that is, whatever that is, you're in an NGO, you're in a school committee, you're in your family, as well as the board of your company, or whatever. Anytime you're trying, and by the way, you can't I don't think anybody can get anything done without doing it with somebody else. So this is for any of those people who want to make sure that as you're trying to get whatever good stuff you want to get done with other people, this is for you. You'll learn something with this. Not only now, but your life will change a year from now. Read the book again. You'll get some things out of it. Snack on it right now. Just, okay, ooh, but that. Maybe I should bring that up in my church committee, or maybe I should bring that up the next time me and my family sit down and say, what do we want to do on our vacation? So, there's lots of opportunities for anybody to implement any of this in those contexts and situations. Obviously, the most obvious clients for this are the people that are going to be our people on project teams and so forth in the corporate or business world. But that's a limited amount of people who could actually use this.
Yeah, I'm with David. There's not much that I could say that he hasn't already said there, except that we worked quite hard to make sure that the book has lots of examples and I think really good and powerful examples from family teams, from teams of friends organizing around charitable stuff, because we didn't want it to just be for the business world. We wanted this to be for anybody who's trying to get good things done with good people.
Well, thank you once again, gentlemen, for being here. Everybody, once again, go get yourself a copy. It's available everywhere. Team Getting Things Done with Others. And if you enjoyed this episode, obviously send it to a friend who will enjoy it and get value out of it. Subscribe to Productivity Mastery. There's more than 180 episodes out there with amazing people like these two gentlemen here. And thank you once again for making it to the end of the episode. Have an amazing day, and let's continue building healthy, high-performance cultures.
Yay.
Great stuff.
Thank you.